Hello there guys and welcome back to another live video here on VGC. It is of course Friday, roughly around midday, which means it's time for another big old chat about all the news from the video games industry, because this is VGC Off the Record. I'm your host, Steven McInerney. I've been joined by two wonderful guests today. Of course, the big boss himself, Big Boss Man, is kind of relevant actually in the video today, but Andy Robertson, the Editor-in-Chief of VGC. How are you doing, Andy? You good?
Hey, good mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good actually. I'm looking forward to this one today for some reason. I don't know why. A lot of people in the live chat as well. It's good to see so many people.
Oh, we've only kind of recently started doing them live, haven't we? And
it's nice.
It's more fun. It's more enjoyable. It's nice to
it definitely is more fun for me.
Interact with actual readers, right?
No, it actually is fun actually. But I wish you could see how many screens I've got going on at the same time. But it's good. And we've also got a returning guest for the first time live. Kind of threw this on Dringo actually. Didn't really realize we were going live today. I apologize. But it is the man behind the numbers, which has stuck, and I'm very happy about that. Mr. Christopher Dring from GamesIndustry.biz. How you doing, mate? You okay?
Yeah, I'm really good. We've got a big show next week at EGX.
Nice.
I'm doing a few big interviews with Jim Ryan at PlayStation and Jade Raymond, who's at Haven Studios.
So, she's got a new game, allegedly coming, hasn't she?
Well, she's
allegedly had a new game coming
for a while.
10 years.
Yeah, she set up a new independent studio in Montreal with a load of her former sort of colleagues, I guess, at Ubisoft and EA and Google. And PlayStation invested in that studio, and they've signed the first game from that. But we're going to talk about with Jade. We're going to talk about like she's trying to set up a studio and set up a culture and all this sort of thing in the middle of a pandemic, which is there's a bit nerdy at that stuff. But
yeah, that isn't ideal at all. Are you both off to? Are you off to, Andy?
I'll turn up for the beer.
Turn up for the drinks.
It's nice to actually see some people, right? I mean, this will be the first time that I've seen a lot of people for the best part of 2 years, because we've just been shut down. There've been no events, whereas usually, kind of people in the UK media / games industry would meet up fairly often, right?
Yeah.
Is this your first event this year, Chris? Physical?
It's first physical event. Oh well, I went to the MCV thing we went to.
Oh yeah, but I mean, it's the first one you've held, right?
Yeah. Well, the last physical event we did was just before the pandemic in February at PAX East in Boston, and then and this is our first one post that. But it's weird because actually we've got this GR Live event, and there's loads of digital tickets that are sold, so people just watching it online. That's still a thing. So we're sort of trying to balance the two. So if you're watching, if people who are watching at home, like Jim Ryan, Jade Raymond, you'll be able to watch it from home. You don't have to come to EGX. To see that stuff.
But you won't be able to get the free drinks, of course. So that's
you won't be able to get free drinks or the free food. I say free. There's a ticket price. You have to pay something.
So my last event I went to was TGS 2019.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that feels such a long time ago. I mean,
VGC would have been. It's a different world.
VGC would have been 6 months old then.
And now
so it's this strange blur of like, it feels like yesterday, but it isn't. Right. I mean, we've operated significantly longer within the pandemic than we have outside of it.
Yeah. The amount of times I say last year and what I actually mean is 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think we all collectively agree that last year just didn't really exist. I mean, it did, but it didn't at the same time. Anyway, guys, this is VGC Off the Record every Friday around midday UK time. We try and go live to deliver you some of the most considered, most informative takes from across the world of video games. If you're a fan of this, please do hit that subscribe button. It just means an awful lot to us and definitely helps the channel. And you can also catch us as well on all the major podcast providers. But yeah, if you want to catch it live here on YouTube, our VGC channel is where you find our friendly faces if you want to, and of course you can check out on podcast providers afterwards. So do us a favor, hit the subscribe button. Over around 150 people watching right now, which is a definite record for us. It's very, very nice, so thank you. Let's get those likes up as well. It'll be massively appreciated. We've got absolutely loads to talk about today. It's been a very busy week in the world of video games. We will be talking about Bluepoint Studios being acquired by PlayStation, what that means for Bluepoint, the Switch OLED, Nintendo's lawyers going to overdrive this week to deny the 4K rumours, and so on. A few games have been released this week that you may have heard of: FIFA 22, eFootball, of course, Super Monkey Ball, Banana Mania. I love hitting games with titles like that. They're just so fun to roll off the tongue. And of course, as the title of this video, we will be chatting about Metal Gear Solid and what next. That's going to come up towards the end of the video because Andy's waiting for some news to break actually, which will be very, very interesting with a little bit of luck. But we're going to start initially with Bluepoint Studios. Of course, They have been welcomed in the world's worst kept video game secret. I'll jump over to the article, to the PlayStation family. I'm taking this, of course, from VideoGamesChronicle.com, where it says Sony Interactive Entertainment has acquired Demon Souls developer Bluepoint Games, the Austin, Texas-based studio, which is specialized in remakes and remastered of older games, has a long history of collaborating with Sony. Its past works include God of War Collection, Metal Gear Solid HD Collection, the Eco and Shadow of Colossus Collection, Uncharted and Nathan Drake Collection, lots of collections, Gravity Rush Remastered, and most recently the PS5 remake of Demon's Souls, which of course was very, very critically acclaimed. Guys, what is your initial reaction to this? I mean, obviously, I think everyone knew it was going to happen given the fact that they accidentally released a graphic online at one point, so this isn't a particular surprise, but at the same time, it's kind of nice to have it confirmed. And I'll go to you, Dringo. What's your expectation with this? I mean, there's been some reports, people suggesting maybe they get to work on their own game, but is that even the point of signing Bluepoint Studios?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of studios that do this. They go on these journeys. They start off by, interestingly, at the PlayStation event that's just gone, Aspire were there, and Aspire, for those that nerdy like me, they started off making ports of PC games onto Mac. That was what they did. They were a port house. And then over time, they became a remaster studio. They started making games for other platforms and remastering them. And they did the Star Wars Episode 1 Racer remaster. Yeah. And now they announced they're remaking Knights of the Old Republic. So it's actually quite a normal journey for studios to go on, from ports to remasters to remakes. And then they go on to do their own stuff. And sometimes there's a middle ground. Sometimes the stuff that they're doing is a game in someone else's franchise and stuff like that. So it feels like a natural step, and PlayStation enables them to go on that journey, basically. It allows them to keep doing that. Because if you've got staff, you've got talented people making amazing remakes, they want to make their own game. They don't want to make someone else's. So it is. I think Andy did a tweet about it. They make really good remakes, and you think, well, I'd like them to keep making those really good remakes. But I think you can't keep people like that just taking other people's stuff and doing things. But it is it was a natural journey for them. And look, PlayStation want more and more. They want original IP. They want big games. Almost all of their studios that were making sort of smaller niche games are now focused on one bigger title. Yeah. So it feels like a perfect fit.
Yeah, it does. I was, you saw on my Twitter, I was a bit disappointed about. Well, not disappointed. That's not the right kind of terminology. I hope they're not completely focused on original content, which is a very weird way of phrasing it, right?
Yeah,
that's kind of heavily loaded. So I reckon it's probably a good guess to say that they're working on like a Demon Souls expansion type thing, something like that, like an original Demon Souls spin-off. That wouldn't surprise me if that's what that means.
I think, because they use the term. I've interviewed Herman Holst loads of times, and he always uses the words original IP or new IP. That's what he uses when he refers to a company working on something. He says it every time, but he didn't say it this time.
So, I mean, it's like they built up all their fan base and all their credibility up to this point through making the best remakes in the industry, right? Yeah. No one else is doing what they're doing. I mean, other people have imitated, but no one comes anywhere near close to the technology, to the attention of detail, the work that they do in recreating these games. You see other companies just kind of slap a port across and make the resolution a little bit higher. These guys are really masters at recreating these titles. And I think if they go over to creating original content, there's no guarantee they're going to be any good at that. They have no pedigree in creating original games, but we know that they're really bloody good at remaking games. So I think we lose more than we gain if they kind of make that leap across, as has been suggested. I mean, to your point, you're absolutely right. I mean, their talent is not going to stick around very long if they're just remaking games forever. It's totally understandable that they want to make original stuff, but that's what it is, right? That's if they're welcome to move on. There are staff that will want to come and work on Demon Souls or something like that. I mean, the ex-editor of Edge, Nathan Brown, sent me a tweet yesterday, and I think he encapsulated this perfectly, which is, he said, I get the aspiration. I think it's a logical step in a way, and I wish them the best. But being the best cover band on the planet doesn't mean you can go off and write your own White Album.
Well, give that band a chance. Is this, to use a football analogy, is this a bit like signing a player as a striker and going, you've been brilliant, right? You're playing left back now. You know, is it a little bit asking to do something that they're not necessarily trained to do, kind of thing? I mean, or is that a bit unfair? You know, like, but surely these.
It's like
these
bringing
people,
in a coach and making him who wants to be the manager.
But
Fine,
surely,
mate,
though, surely
but you're a great coach.
They are talented developers. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to produce what they have. And I'm sure they got to the position that they're in to play devil's advocate because they have an ounce of creativity about them in the first place. You know, like, I mean, is that? Am I simplifying that?
No, I think is the artists are amazing there, right?
Yeah.
And the programmers are clearly brilliant, and the attention to detail and all that kind of stuff is brilliant. What we don't know is how good they are at designing their own stuff and things like that. And you bring that talent in, and if you're part of PlayStation, there's probably plenty of people at other studios who would love to get a shot at, who are sitting underneath Neil Druckmann or whatever, who's saying, "How do I break out from this? Oh, hang on. Maybe there's an opportunity for me to go and work at Bluepoint on their original thing." And that's one of the cool things of being part of a network of studios, is that it gives opportunities for people at Media Molecule or Guerrilla or someone else to go and work with a team that are doing something interesting. I think the thing is people step up into this role. Like I got Andy on the podcast, right? Rare decided they didn't want to make Banjo-Kazooie anymore, right? They decided to take a step away, and then Playtonic come in and they step into the breach. They step into that role. And I think you'll get that with this. Yes, they make the best. Vicarious Visions is probably the only ones that come close to what Bluepoint do in terms of amazing remakes. And but there are other people who will step into that and take that position. And hopefully Bluepoint will go on and be very successful at doing what they do in the next stage. But I don't think comparing them to footballers or even music artists is the best. They're not individuals, they're collective. And they're just, maybe they're missing one or two key players, but
the analogy is fine in terms of your role within a formation of studios. They're offering something very, very different to all of the other PlayStation studios.
Here, by the way,
and I'm a big fan of their work. I love all of their stuff they've done in the past, Bluepoint, and I just think, is there any kind of there aren't many, if any at all, companies that are better at making great original games, big blockbuster games, than Sony, right? That is literally their mandate. They make the big Hollywood blockbusters. So I just don't see why there's any need. Okay, I'm being pessimistic to the comments point, but why do you? I mean, there's no guarantee they're going to make anything great. I mean, do we need another Days Gone? Do we need another kind of dad game?
Who knows what they're making?
If they went and did MGS, for example, they do a fantastic job, and everyone would be really excited. I don't know. I'm an old man whinging about nothing.
Who is on the internet?
I kind of expect Bluepoint. Maybe they're making Demon's Souls 2, right? They've learned how to. They've learned the first game. They've developed the skills. They've learned that game inside out. They go, right, now we know how to take this. Maybe that's what they're working on, and that would be that'd be a natural next step for someone to completely remake one game and then go and do an original content. Like Toys for Bob's a great example. I know that they made original content before. They did the Crash Bandicoot stuff and the Spyro stuff, and then they went on to make an original game from that, and it was very good, and it was very much in keeping with the spirit. But anyway, I think it's an obvious. I think it's a natural next step.
I mean, that'd be quite cool, right? If they did do another Demon's Souls game, that would be quite cool.
It seems an easy win.
I've seen that. Well. I've heard that suggested, that, as I said earlier, that it could be a Miles Morales type, kind of Demon's Souls second thing, which that would be quite cool. I mean, don't get me wrong. If they're splitting into two teams and they're doing some remakes and they're doing some original stuff, brilliant. But they're a studio of 70 people. I can't see that happening personally. But
time will tell. Time will tell.
Yeah, it's good to see PlayStation. I understand PlayStation are being forced into this to buy these studios a little bit, but it is nice to see them.
Where do we think? Obviously, they came out and said as well. I can't remember who said it now. I apologise. Who was it who said? I'm going to jump over to this article now. Actually, 1 second. Here we go. PlayStation Studios head Herman Hulse said that Sony Interactive Entertainment remains open to further acquisitions following a number of recent studio purchases. On Thursday, SIE announced that it bought Bluepoint Games, the Texas-based studio behind various remakes and remasters. I'm going to get down to the quotes. Herman told IGN, "We are open always to building new relationships or bringing people in-house, but only if we adhere to the quality-first mentality and the right kind of innovative content, new experiences and diverse experiences. Because all of these teams, they share a lot, but they're also very different from one another, and that's what I really like. And I think that's what the PlayStation audience, the PlayStation fans deserve. It's that diverse slate of games coming out of the PlayStation Studios. We're not buying teams to just be bigger. We're only buying teams because we feel that together we're going to make something that is going to be even better if we did separate from one another." I know I'm throwing this entirely into speculation here, but is this something that either of you see as an imminent thing, or just keeping the door open? Or
I mean, Dringo can talk more to this than me, but I do like the sound of that, because Herman Hulse has obviously not been in the post for very long. I do like that he's making a point of trying to diversify their lineup, because let's be honest, I mean, for the last decade or so, they've been very kind of putting out very similar games.
Yeah.
Sony, for good reason. So, but it's nice to hear that they're, for example, exploring into multiplayer games and what have you, different genres.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting that Sony's studio acquisition is very different to Microsoft. Like Microsoft, 4 or 5 years ago had a situation where, even nearer, where they weren't making enough AAA games. They didn't have enough internal studios, didn't have enough talent. They had to go out and buy stuff in order to do that. Sony aren't buying new studios. They're buying studios they were already working with. Bluepoint were already making PlayStation games. Firesprite, who they bought last, were already making PlayStation games. They haven't actually added to their lineup necessarily. These games were coming to PlayStation anyway. The situation that's in the market at the moment is that because the games industry is booming so much, it's proven to be COVID resistant. Investors are spending millions. You've got Xbox, you've got THQ, not THQ, Embracer. You've got it's THQ Nordic, but Embracer Group. You've got Tencent buying Sumo, EA, Codemasters. Like billions of dollars are being spent on studios. If you're an independent studio right now, or independent games company of any type, there's a good chance someone's sniffing around. And that's a problem for PlayStation, because they've got lots of independent studios. They work with lots of independent companies. And, they needed to buy Bluepoint because someone else might. They needed to buy Insomniac. They needed to get these studios in order to make sure that they continue making PlayStation games. And so it's more of a defensive move for Sony.
Do you think the Bethesda purchase in particular for Microsoft was obviously not an intimidation tactic, but it was definitely impressive. Do you think that was felt over at Sony in terms of they were a little bit wary? Because, I mean, that's a big move, isn't it? And, of course, as you said, the fear, the idea that they could step in and go, hello, to Bluepoint. I'm not sure that's how Phil Spencer would start the conversation. But, in general, do you think there's an element of that because of her reaction?
Microsoft aren't the biggest investor in games at the minute. They're spending billions, but Tencent are spending even more. Embracer bought like 40 studios in the last 2 years. It's the whole market. It's not just Microsoft. And so the whole thing is intimidating. Like Bethesda, PlayStation were in a different position. They didn't need studios. They were making, look at the games they released in the last 12, 15 months. From The Last of Us and Ghost of Tsushima and Spider-Man and Astro Bot and Sackboy and Demon's Souls and Returnal, Ratchet and Clank. For any company, that's a massive year. And they've got a big year next year. And they weren't in the same boat as Xbox. They don't need to buy Bethesda, but they do need to protect what they've got. And I think that's what they're doing. And Nintendo are the same. Nintendo bought Next Level Games. They was the same thing. They've got the team that makes Luigi's Mansion. They're independent, therefore they're at risk. Mercury Steam that are doing the new Metroid game, same thing. Nintendo might be keeping an eye on that. Make sure that they stay in the family if they want them to be.
Let's go on to Nintendo, actually. Let's go on to Nintendo. It's been an interesting week in the world of Nintendo. I'll jump over to the article written by our very own Chris Scullion. He's away on Radio 4 duties. I mean, little old Radio 4, what do they know? But either way, the reports this week came out that Nintendo has moved to swiftly deny a new report claiming at least 11 studios have 4K Switch development kits. Bloomberg, as you probably heard on the internet, claims that at least 11 companies, including Zynga, have software toolkits provided by Nintendo that feature support for 4K graphics. The article claims that by the time Nintendo had officially revealed the Switch OLED in July, it had already handed out 4K development kits to third-party studios and asked them to start making 4K supported games. It was claimed that the enhanced 4K supported Switch was planned for late 2022 at the earliest. But Nintendo's response, Nintendo's Japanese arm promptly took to Twitter to publicly deny the report. It said a news report on September the 30th, 2021 falsely claims that Nintendo is supplying tools to drive game development for a Nintendo Switch with 4K support. To ensure correct understanding among our investors and customers, we want to clarify that this report is not true. We want to also restate that, as we announced in July, we have no plan plans for any new model other than the Nintendo Switch OLED model, which will launch on October the 8th, 2021. Bloomberg's report actually includes apparently information from Zynga employees who were asked not to be identified. They've also denied the report publicly as well as a company, which is all very, very, very interesting. Now, I saw you say this, and I think it's probably common knowledge, but I saw you say this, Stringo, that the idea is like you can't lie about this stuff, can you? Legally, Nintendo can't deny it because of investors, but is the wording important here to play devil's advocate?
You're right. It's quite a specific denial.
Yes.
Right? They haven't denied the existence of a 4K device. They haven't denied the existence that they're working on that sort of stuff. What they've denied is that developers have tools to make 4K games. That's what they've denied, that very specific part, which admittedly is quite a big part of Bloomberg's report. They've denied that very specific thing. So it doesn't deny everything, but it is very specific. And when you're talking, that's to their investors primarily, right? You can't, normally it's you either give a completely vague statement, we do not comment on rumor, speculation, or whatever, or you give a very but they've gone very specific here. And I think it's if there are 4K dev kits and developers, Nintendo will be in trouble with their investors because they just lied. But they didn't need to. So I think it was, I don't know, something's going on.
What about
there's something
here?
happening.
You've seen the wording. I've highlighted the wording. It says a news report on
It's very careful.
It says
wording,
for a Nintendo Switch with 4K support. Could we just be looking at the alleged? I mean, I'm just speculating here, but could it just not be just a new console that isn't the Switch? I mean, I don't know what an extension.
But
so
in the hands of devs at this stage, it just feels.
I know what you're getting at. Yeah, it feels a bit. Go on, Andy. You were going to say?
It's just some of the wording, right? Like, Nintendo Switch for a start. It might not be Nintendo Switch. It might be a successor. Is supplying, but has it supplied? It's just a lot of grey areas. And as someone who's worked, as a reporter with Nintendo as you have, Chris. I mean, as well as I. You're absolutely right to say that they'll get into big trouble if they lie. But I just think, even though I hear what you're saying, and usually that would just dismiss it, my past experience of having them actually lie to me about similar stuff like this, and they have done that in the past, makes me kind of dismiss that a little bit. I mean, I remember specifically, I'm going back a long way now. I think there were reports from some credible outlet similar to Bloomberg about the DS Lite before that was announced, and Nintendo specifically denied it like the same week that it was eventually announced. And I'm sure there's cases of that happening as well. I mean, here's why being a reporter sometimes a bit of a mugs game, right? Which is that you can say this stuff and plans change, and then you look like you were wrong. But obviously, I mean, this guy, this Bloomberg reporter. Sorry, I'm always awful with his name. I'm not even going to look. But I know he's an excellent journalist because some of the, and I know some of the stuff that he's reported has matched what other people have heard, including you and myself, on certain things. And I just don't.
Takashi Mochizuki, I think that's right. I just wanted to clarify.
I always forget his name. Apologies to him. I just got an email from Konami.
Oh, you got this is what essentially. If you've been the title of this video, it was always intended that Andy was waiting for a reply from Konami first. Do you want to come back to it?
Back on topic. What was I talking about? So I mean, look at. I mean, he got, for example, he got dogs abuse last year when he reported on Sony stepping back from Japan somewhat. And their Japan studio, they're letting all their staff, their contracts lapse and what have you. And then I and another journalist, Alex Calvin, broke the story earlier this year that they were closing Japan studio, and it completely vindicated all that reporting that he was abused for, basically, because obviously it was when Sony's merits come out and go, oh, this is not true, blah 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 blah. My point is that I've made before is that I just don't see why a respected, credible journalist, someone like him, would double down on this when he really doesn't have to, because he's already, probably received untold amounts of flack for the initial report that the OLED, what became the OLED model, was going to have 4K. There's no reason for him to double down on this. Like, if anything, it's probably his motivation is to just let it, kind of slip under the carpet.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was, I don't know if you saw, a similar thing happen with Bloomberg recently in the tech sector. Did you see this?
Yeah, I saw that.
Apple, yeah, it's a thing where Apple and all the people involved were absolutely vehemently denying it. And Bloomberg said, no, it's true. And it came this weird thing where it's just like, well, someone is wrong, right? And and it's just that's the thing. I can believe. This is the problem. You talked about the problem of leaks. This is the reason why I don't leak stuff very often, very rarely, and it's because things do change. So there's this theory that the OLED had a 4K ability at the beginning, right? It could possibly, when it said that maybe is what's sitting in people's dev kits, sitting in devs, right? As an old OLED thing that had 4K support. It could have been that. But this is the problem with leaks, is that things do change. And it also sets expectations so high. So at the moment, when the OLED was announced, there was a bit of a collective disappointment that it wasn't what we thought it was going to be. Yeah. But maybe it was at one point. But because we reported at it when it was still being developed, like fascinatingly, I found out about the original pitch for a game that Xbox is making right now. And I thought, wow, this game is going to be like the best game ever. It sounds absolutely incredible. And now I've sort of been told recently what the current pitch is, and it still sounds amazing, but it's actually significantly.
This is Everwild, isn't it? Let's be honest. You don't have to say
that. I'm not commenting, but it's been significantly. But it's the truth. But this happens at all games. Every AAA game starts off with, "This is what we're going to do." Actually, it's going to be this. Right? You look at BioShock Infinite. If you look at what the original pitch was, the game that came out, it's a great example. Still a great game that came out. Peter Molyneux, right? He's famous for this. We're going to do a game that's going to do all this, and then it doesn't do that.
Well, Cyberpunk is the most famous example recently, where all this, this thing that was promised, and it was essentially just...
It's even when I was at Playtonic, working in game dev myself, the projects that we were working on before we eventually released the second game, Impossible Lair, that changed 2 or 3 times. You know, so that could have leaked. Some journalists could have reported that, and then we release, Impossible Lair, and they'd be seen as a liar, but they're not. Yeah. So it is very tricky. And when you're reporting,
it's bad for journalists, but it's also bad for the consumer. Consumer thinks it's going to be something else, and it's just disappointing all round.
I mean, the pandemic's made it even worse as well. I mean, last year we broke the big story about the Mario remasters, which turned out to be all stars, and obviously the pandemic turned up, right around the time we reported that. That could still not be out. If they wanted to have pushed that back, they could have done. They were supposed to have a big E3 show, celebrate Mario with this and that. I mean, the theme park was supposed to open in Japan last year, and all of this stuff didn't happen. Thank Christ they eventually did announce it in September, or my head would be on a spike. But that's the pandemic, to the point. Pandemic has made it even more difficult, and that's why I try not to report on timing anymore, because even in the recent past, I've been caught my pants down a little bit saying this is going to happen, and then it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I've said this on the podcast before, many years ago, when the Wii was revealed in the Europe, they were announcing the price. They were announcing the what was going to be bundled with the console, how many Wii remotes, all that kind of stuff. And we reported. I was worked at MCV at the time, and we reported on what the announcement was going to be, because we'd been told by Nintendo. Right, so by
the way, can I just interject there? This is a really important point that should be a takeaway for anyone who kind of consumes games news as a reader. Sometimes the source is the company themselves.
Yeah,
so when you're getting slaughtered online, it's like,
yeah. Well, we were given this story.
Do you reckon they ever do that? Or just play with you? Do you reckon like Shigeru Miyamoto, like, this is going to be funny? And they just
there's absolutely evidence of kind of stuff being planted, right? But that's when you've got to double check your sources and trust who you're getting your information from.
In this instance, it was because they wanted it on the cover of the magazine, and the magazine was coming out before the thing, so we couldn't say it was official, but we did the whole thing. And then came out, and it wasn't the price, it wasn't the configuration, it wasn't any of it. And we remember turning around, looking at the person at Nintendo who told us it all, and he just went, they changed their minds. Right, and it's the same with the famous one. This is well before my time. Is when PlayStation decided there were going to be $299, I think, for the first PlayStation at E3, and Steve Race, who worked at Sony America at the time, stood up and just went $299 and sat down. He didn't have a speech prepared because originally it was going to be $399, and then that morning they decided to make it $299. So he didn't have a speech, so he just said $299 and sat down. And
sorry, go on.
And it's just like, that didn't leak, thankfully. But that's how much stuff changes.
Do you remember the E3 reporting I did earlier this year around what they were doing for that? And that was another ever-evolving situation, because they're having to put this information back to the publishers, right? I mean, we reported that they were considering charging for game demos and for access to their, their premium, which was absolutely true. I mean, I it is a fact. Well, that they were doing that, and I've heard it's been suggested to me by some sources who were involved in those conversations that they might have even changed it within the 24 hours that I reached out to them and told them I was going to publish the story, because they knew how it was going to go down, and they knew that already a lot of publishers were telling them they hated it. So obviously I published that story, and an hour later, I don't even think it was an hour later, they put a tweet out basically saying, no, this E3 is free, which I've got egg on my face, but it shows you how quickly things can change. So they can use
you guys as sounding boards essentially for the public opinion, is that what you're saying? So they can just leak a story, put it out,
totally do.
You take the fall, and
the thing is, it helps as well a lot of the time, right? Like there's plenty of examples in the past, I think, of where leaks have actually helped. I mean, there's examples where leaks don't help. But just to kind of set expectations and things like that. Like maybe if everyone's expecting something that's going to disappoint if you're seeing it announced on a stage or in a Nintendo Direct, sometimes it can help to have some pre-reporting.
Mario and Rabbids.
Yeah, I was trying to think whether that was a good leak or a bad leak.
Well, people really didn't want that.
No, they didn't want
really
it.
They hated the leak, and then the eventual thing was actually we loved it.
Oh yeah, it was brilliant.
I don't know whether
the initial reaction was bad. It was bad.
I don't think there would have been any negativity whether there was no leak. So I'd probably say that was a bad leak. But I'm racking my brain trying to think of an example of the polar opposite. But there's definitely cases where I do think a leak setting expectations is a good thing. Like imagine if everyone's expecting, for example, a big remake of a big game, and then someone reports, oh, actually it's a more low level kind of remaster, then that's going to help in terms of the set expectations, for the potential kind of disappointment when they announce it and stuff like that.
We know companies are more aware of that this day because of social media, because we see it with the wording when they're doing, I don't know, PlayStation Showcase or Nintendo Directs, like, won't feature this game or featuring games mainly of this. It used to be like, there used to be a lot more open, and now the wording's changed so much just to essentially negate the social media backlash. I understand why they have to do it. So you can see it's not a surprise to see that it would feed into
people don't listen though.
What was that? I wasn't paying any attention. I heard what I wanted to hear. No, you're right. They don't, and they never will do. But I mean, is that even fun to listen? I don't know.
But they have to do that now. That's smart. That's really smart now. That if you're going to announce an event, set expectations early. Like Capcom will announce it, and it'll say, I think if Square Enix do that actually, they'll say these are the games that are in it, so that there's no one expecting, one of their big Final Fantasy to turn up or something like that.
Nintendo do games that are coming this year or games that are coming this winter.
I don't know if this is a good time to go to that, not given what we've just talked about. But either way, the title of this video, we want to discuss what's going on next with Metal Gear Solid. Simply, I mean, to be honest, the link for this is essentially that obviously Bluepoint Studios is being acquired. Plenty of rumours around the internet about what they will be doing next, and little old me knows nothing in the middle here, so don't listen to a word I'm saying, But Andy, as of course, has been speaking to Konami. I have no idea what he's about to say at all, or if it's big or small. I don't know. No idea. But either way, what's going on with Metal Gear over at Konami, Andy?
Metal Gear Survive 2. Not really.
With vengeance.
So with the Bluepoint stuff happening, kind of this week, and the rampant speculation around them working on MGS, I thought I'd do a bit more digging, and kind of look into what's actually happening there. So if anyone's followed my previous reporting on Silent Hill specifically, a lot of the kind of the headline details of this I have mentioned or alluded to, but I've decided to kind of dig a little bit deeper with some people in the know and get some more detail. So the story is basically that Konami's set to ramp up its premium game development. After several years that it's kind of spent in relative, quietness in terms of its biggest premium brands. So that means new installments, remakes for its biggest franchises, including Metal Gear, Castlevania, and Silent Hill. So the last Metal Gear game was obviously 2018's Metal Gear Survive, which was critically panned. And the last mainline Castlevania release was 2014's Lord of Shadow 2. So arguably, if you look at the kind of the discourse online, Konami's become known more for kind of pachinko gambling machines recently than its kind of premium PC and console releases. So I think it's fair to say they've been doing somewhat of a bit of soul searching. And recently, if you've kind of paid attention, you would have noticed that they had a big restructure this year, which saw a lot of their kind of development divisions combine. And people who understand the situation there have kind of confirmed to me that this is part of a drive at Konami to kind of get back into the premium game space in a bigger way than it has in the recent years. So the details, the kind of the nitty gritty details that consumers will care about is that, so yes, as I kind of said at the top, they are, and I have alluded to in my Silent Hill reporting in the past, they are working on remakes and new installments of, you know, various their biggest brands. So you're talking this isn't all of them, but across them there will be some remakes and some new installments for either Castlevania, Silent Hill, or Metal Gear. So the first new title I think we're actually going to see come to market is a new Castlevania game, which has been described to me as a reimagining of the series. And that's in development internally at Konami in Japan, with support from some kind of local external studios, which is what I understand. I mean, obviously, the biggest one is that there's been a lot of speculation that Demon Souls studio Bluepoint has been working on Metal Gear Solid. However, from what I've been told, Metal Gear is actually being worked on by an external studio based in China. Okay. So this project is in early-ish development, although it's been talked about a little bit from what I can gather. But let's put it this way: it's further behind than their other stuff. And the interesting thing is that several sources have suggested to me that it's going to be based on Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater rather than the original MGS.
I think that's
which is obviously
popular call.
Which is obviously a big fan favorite. It's my favorite Metal Gear. I know it's a lot of people's favorite Metal Gears. So that's what I've been told. That it's interesting that from the people at the publishing sources I've spoken to, the Japan side sources I've spoken to, it's clear that this has been something that's been talked about for a while. So I get the impression that it may have started actually ramping up more recently. I mean, certainly, as I said, the kind of the restructure at Konami happened at the start of this year. So, but I have been told to expect that one last in terms of their timeline. So also Konami's intends to release remasters of all the original Metal Gear Solid games for modern consoles ahead of
remasters or remakes, as in like just
remasters.
Okay, that makes sense.
You know, so you know, like a similar collection or something. I know that I think they're actually the older ones are still kind of accessible on some of them, but I've heard noise that there is some sort of, you know, another kind of collection plans to port these ahead of that, which makes complete sense, right? If they're doing something larger. So finally, as I've reported earlier this year, multiple Silent Hill games are currently in development at various external studios. So one of these was outsourced to a prominent Japanese developer earlier this year, I was told. So Konami should publicly showcase its plans at the major shows next year, which, coming back to anyone who's been on this podcast since the start, big caveat, that's, you know, subject to disruption from the pandemic or whatever, because obviously Konami pulled out of this year's E3, which it said was timing issues. Although at the time it did confirm it had a number of key projects in the works. So if you go and look at their what's happening, you know, officially from what Konami's saying, there is the breadcrumbs of this. You know, they're back at major shows. They're you know, they're launching merchandise. They're doing these, like, you know, Castlevania collection that came out the other day. It's like the lights are turning back on after a little period. So the key to this, I understand from talking to people, is that basically Konami Japan, as like many Japanese companies, has historically been, you know, very conservative and very reluctant to giving away the keys to its big brands. Yeah. Which is, you know, a reason why, you know, a lot of there's a lot of record of previous pitches from developers that didn't kind of take off. And that's the reason for that, because they've previously been very hesitant. I mean, the most famous one where we reported on earlier this year was the Until Dawn studio, Supermassive. They pitched a Silent Hill game, and I believe one of the what's their horror series called?
Dark Pictures Anthology.
Dark Pictures. Yeah, I believe one of those installments did actually start as the Silent Hill pitch. I can't think what one. It's probably easy to work out. But basically, what I understand is that after Metal Gear Survive and Contra Rogue Corps, which is their, other than like kind of Bomberman R, that's their kind of big efforts recently in the premium space. After they kind of critically bombed, they've softened somewhat in working with external studios, which is why you're now seeing some of this spring to light. I should say that I believe that PES, or eFootball as it now own, it is kind of has its own separate remit, because that kind of is quite a money earner for them. So I think it's kind of protected from a lot of this. And I would say that seeing it come out yesterday and become the Steam's supposed worst rated game ever from users, and there's some GIFs going around of some spectacular bugs and stuff like that. It's not necessarily reflective of the other stuff they're going to do going forwards, because that, to me, it sounds like that's still very much in, conservative land where, only we can touch this and we're not listening to what you say about it. And the result is this.
I did love Chris in the chat, our tired old hack, saying, did the email from Konami simply just apologise for eFootball? I presume we didn't, which we won't get onto too much. So just to clarify, for those listening, essentially, we could be looking at a Snake Eater remake. Is that correct? Is that
to my understanding? I mean, again, I don't want to.
Of course, yeah.
Flag to the mast too much. You can see I'm publishing the story right now.
Okay, so the story will be over.
You can read it.
I will let me know when it's live, and I'll bring it up as well, so we can read your more your words on there in a little bit more concise manner together as we're live. That would be absolutely huge, I think, in general. Fingers crossed this does come to fruition, and we don't have to wait too long. I presume.
I should say as well that I'm expecting to start hearing about this stuff next year, because obviously they were trying to get started on turning up at shows and stuff, and they've said they've got multiple projects in the work, but that didn't happen this year. I mean, originally we reported and I expected to see some Silent Hill stuff this year, but obviously thus far that's not happened. So I would expect to start seeing some of this next year, but Castlevania is the earliest, I understand. Yeah. And then Silent Hill, and then Metal Gear is still quite early.
So I've just brought the article up online. So essentially, if you're listening now, here's what Andy's just written. Konami is set to ramp up its premium game development with new installments and remakes for its biggest franchises, including Metal Gear and Castlevania. That's according to publishing sources who spoke to VGC anonymously, which is, of course, VGC being Andy here next to us, because they did not have permission to discuss their projects publicly. Konami's original games output has slowed down significantly in recent years. The last new Metal Gear game was 2018's critically panned Metal Gear Survive, while the last mainline Castlevania release was 2014's Lord of Shadow 2. In the past decade, the company has arguably grown a bigger reputation for its pachinko gambling games than for its premium PC and console releases. However, following a restructure of the company's game development divisions earlier this year, Konami is now focused on bringing back its biggest brands to the premium game space, VGC was told. The first of these titles will be a new Castlevania game, which sources described as a reimagining of the series currently in development internally at Konami in Japan, with support from local external studios. There's been much speculation that Demon Souls studio Bluepoint could be working on a remake of Metal Gear Solid. However, VGC was told the series is actually being worked on by an external studio based in China. The remake project is currently in early development, and multiple sources suggest that it would be centered around fan favorite entry Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater rather than the original MGS. Konami also tends, we understand, to release remasters of the Metal Gear Solid games for modern consoles. Chris, your take on this breaking news from the man to my whatever side it is on the video, I can't remember.
It's one of those things, isn't it? Konami was struggling to make their games work, right? Everyone loves Metal Gear Solid, but it was a money pit of Kojima's making, right? He threw
ask me about the time I went to Kojima Productions when he was at Konami.
Andy, tell me about that time that you went to Kojima Productions.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Oh, good. Oh man, like whenever that conversation comes up about you know, kind of why they closed the Konami iteration. But you're right, like they must have just been burning money for those guys. I mean, I got a ton of respect for Kojima and the games and his craftsmanship, but if you take your emotion out of it and you look at the kind of the cold-hearted business, I mean, I remember being amazed going to visit them at Konami, and they've got multiple floors of a skyscraper, and they had a room just for Nerf guns. And they had like a state of the art. They got a state of the art kind of you know, capture studio, and this is right on the cusp of when single player games started being deemed, you know, too risky, too, you know, unprofitable. When this all happened, right? I mean, obviously we're seeing, you know, different kind of monetizations kind of bring them back somewhat at the moment, but the bottom line is that you know, Kojima Productions at Konami wasn't making Fortnite or GTA. They were making like one Metal Gear game every 5 years that did what did they sell, like 5 to?
Yeah, it was like the level of numbers didn't, you know, it was being treated like, and the thing is, Konami isn't a publisher, isn't EA, isn't Ubisoft. They haven't got these massive marketing teams with $100 million budgets or anything like that. So they are being asked to, they've got a game that's supposed that in order for it to be profitable needs to be competing with those titles, but they don't have the ability to do it. And that was the problem. You know, Silent Hill was similar. In horror genre was in decline at the time, or it perceived to be. And it was a time when games budgets were going up, but the market was becoming more contested. And then the sort of digital boom and the indie boom sort of allowed all that to change. And annoyingly, Konami decided, yeah, this isn't working for us. Just as that started to take off, so just as the market would have worked for them, where they would be able to find a corner for Metal Gear Solid, or where they'd be able to find a corner for Castlevania and Bomberman and all that kind of stuff. As soon as that sort of happened, they ended up exiting it and focusing on the business areas that made sense for them. And PES, which was still profitable for them, but not anywhere near to levels it used to be.
Yeah.
And now they're probably looking at the market like everybody is, going, games are booming, more people are playing games than ever. There's more ways of distributing your games. Even if you know, there used to be a time when Metal Gear Solid was like single player games back in the day. This is the reason why they were unprofitable. You bought a game, came out, the company had 2 to 3 weeks to sell it before it ended up in the pre-owned shelves. And as soon as it was on the pre-owned shelves, there was no more money to be made because everyone would buy the pre-owned copy. And now pre-owns doesn't really matter. Digital discounting and changing, streaming has completely transformed legacy games. Suddenly games now can be making money for years and years and years, even single player ones. And it's now a real opportunity for Konami. They've got the IP, they've got fan bases. They've lost a lot of their talent. Kojima obviously being the most famous one. But it's a bit infuriating, I guess, but it's nice to hear that they'll be back, because I used to love talking to Konami.
The last I heard as well, I mean, obviously the split between Kojima and Konami ended, you know, kind of quite badly, right? For kind of both parties. From the outside, it looked like they definitely weren't mates. But from last I heard, they're on pretty good terms again. I mean, I'm not talking about they're not, you know, kind of in bed together necessarily, but certainly any animosity there was at the start from them splitting, I believe that has cooled. So they are on kind of talking terms. Because I know, I believe, I probably should have prepared this a bit better. I think Kojima Production Studio head was an ex-Konami guy, like one of the ex-Konami kind of senior execs as well. So there was that link. But from my understanding, the relationship has cooled somewhat. I don't believe, and I can't say that I have looked into this a lot, but I do not believe they're involved directly in the MGS remake project that's going on. However, I do believe that they would seek to get, you know, Kojima himself to endorse it in a similar way to maybe the Twin Snakes, where he was kind of got a producer credit and he's on the box, because obviously the fan base know to look out for that. But I don't think he's really involved in any significant way. You know, maybe he's aware of it, but certainly on the Konami side, I believe they would seek to kind of reach out to get that endorsement, if only if it's a marketing thing.
They're not going to do a David Jaff, right?
Oh yeah, so we're going to have Hideo Kojima on the stream next.
Hideo's there, like, I'm pissed off. I need to talk about that. Imagine, get someone drop him a text. I actually know Dringo's got like not a lot of time because I know he's got a meeting at 30:30 there and so on. I mean, so we won't go on for too long. But essentially, that is look, as I feel as a gamer, as opposed to I'm not really an industry bot like you guys. I mean, for me, a healthy Konami is a fun Konami for the game industry, and that's the way I feel about it. I do want to see Silent Hill, Castlevania, Metal Gear Solid. I've given up on eFootball already. Now maybe that's probably harsh, but I do want to see these franchises healthy because I mean, who doesn't? It's exciting, it's fun. Some of the most interesting games that in the industry, full stop. And it is a shame about eFootball. I mean, it's early days. Fingers crossed that can recover a little bit of form there. I
totally agree. I think we should end this on the sentiment that I think it's really exciting that Konami are kind of taking a bit more attention into working into this stuff. They've had a little bit of a difficult transition. They got a lot of flack, some fair, some not fair. PES, they've clearly mishandled that at launch. But it is a service game now, and there's service games. The history of them is littered with bad launches that eventually came good. But it's great to see that they're looking at this stuff. It's nice to hear that they're taking a bit more of an open approach in terms of their big franchises, because video game fans want to see Konami back making games in relevance. There's a lot of love for these franchises, and I think everyone hopes that this all goes well for them.
We forget, and it's easy to kind of like dunk on eFootball, and I have done it as well because it's funny to an extent because the faces are hilarious. But you're forgetting it's early on, and I'm hoping this team, they would have put an awful lot of love and attention into this game. Of course they will do. It's what they do professionally, and they will care about it. And for some people, this game could be the solution. Not everyone has £60-70 to drop on a new FIFA every year. So I do hope that this game gets better. I do hope it works because it will make someone happy somewhere, and that ultimately is all that matters. I mean, not every person wants to get involved in the money in the FIFA ecosystem, so we do need that help and we do need it good, and let's give it a little bit of time, and I'm sure they'll take all that feedback and criticism to heart, and hopefully the game will improve for it. But either way, guys, thank you. We didn't really get onto the Switch OLED or all the games.
Oh yeah, I've been. We could carry on talking if Chris needs to.
Oh yeah, you can if you want to.
No, I mean, I honestly, I don't really want to go to the meeting.
Let's screw the meeting.
Yeah, screw the meeting up. I mean, go on, Switch OLED. Let's talk about Switch OLED.
I've been playing Switch OLED at a Nintendo event. It is what I can say. And I've been playing Metroid Dread, and I got a lot of flack for my initial Switch OLED hands-on, which I did in August, because I posted a very, very positive hands-on with it. And you know what? I understand that there's a lot of negativity around this device because it's not what people wanted and it's not what people were expecting. Coming back to our controlled leak thing before, right? Imagine if we'd have done a story saying there is no 4K Switch, got no LED screen. This would have been received way better than it was when they dropped a trailer and everyone was gutted. And that negativity was still lingering.
Quick FYI, by the way, I've currently got there's a video on our YouTube channel of Andy and Chris talking about it, so you can go watch that after. It's currently playing on screen right now, but loads more. And anyway, go back to yourself, Andy, just let you know.
So I got a lot of flack, mostly because I think there's probably a lot of lingering kind of disappointment that it hasn't got the 4K stuff. But listen, like if you're a Switch player and you do play handheld mode a lot, this is a relevant upgrade. Like, I mean, I called it a striking upgrade, and it is. It was when I first picked it up. For anyone who knows what an OLED screen is, you'll know what a significant jump it is on the old LCD screen on the traditional Switch. And if you don't know what OLED is, when you pick this thing up, it is going to really surprise you. I mean, it's difficult to see in the footage here because obviously it's most people will be watching it on a non-OLED screen, I imagine, and it's a video of the screen, so you don't really get to see it. Plus, the lighting where I'm playing it here is a bit poor.
Was that a Nintendo, by the way? Was that? Yeah.
I know the US press who got to play at an event. They were playing like in a big dark event with kind of dramatic lighting, and you get to see the effect of the screen a bit better on camera because it's so bright. But the big question around this device is not going to be whether it's good. It's going to be whether you're willing to pay $350 or whatever it is for it. Yeah, because it's a lot of money if you've already got a Switch. But you will definitely want it. I'll say that if you're a portable player, because the screen is excellent.
I'm dreading.
Not just is it a big old screen, right? It feels it almost gets rid of the bezel. It's glass, got a lovely glass finish. The screen itself, the quality of it is a significant upgrade. And then you've got stuff like the stand on the back of the device, which is almost something that I'm sure, like a lot of other people, I just forgot about pretty immediately because it's so crap. The silly little leg thing. It's now like really good. Like it's brilliant. It's like I don't even know if it's.
That. I went to
you could almost punch this
thing,
train, and it's not going to. I mean, okay, I'm being a bit of hyperbole there, but you couldn't punch the thing, but it's sturdy as hell, right? It's very sturdy. It's like it feels very tight when you move it. You can set it to any angle, so it goes across the whole back rear of the device, and all of that mess of logos on the back is gone. It's nice and clean with this big stand. The dock's really nice and has like a glossy finish on the inside. But that's the look and feel, right? It's going to come down to whether you play portable games a lot and whether you're happy dropping £300 or $350, I think it is, just for that.
Yeah.
But the other thing, it came to me the other day is that obviously there's more and more of these cloud versions of games, right? So there's Dying Light 2 is the latest, I think, coming out on Switch. And I did wonder if that's one of the big advantages of having this from a non-handheld perspective. If whether or not having that direct Ethernet sort of port enables us to be able to play those games a little bit more effectively than the Switch currently enables with over wireless internet. Yeah. That was a thing that popped into my head. I've not played it. I have no idea. I ordered one though. I'm getting one. Very excited.
By the way, Metroid Dread looks great on this footage. It looks really good fun.
It's really, really good. Like I love how it's it feels almost like, I mean, let's be honest, everyone's been waiting for Metroid.
I know that's obvious.
Yeah, everyone's been waiting for Metroid Prime 4, right? I almost forgot that it's been so long since there was a proper new 2D installment. But the great thing about this is that it feels like a merger between the two, and not in a compromised way. It's just a very cinematic.
It was that camera angle that as well before.
The camera's just always like kind of flourishing and stuff like that. The cutscenes look fantastic. They really do. Like it makes me excited for Prime 4. So I think this will satisfy people
on screen right now. This camera angle as the big dude is walking towards you. I absolutely love that. You probably see it a little bit delayed, but it's the one where you shoot him in the corridor.
That's a mechanic. So obviously one of the main things is like the SAX, I think it's called, the kind of the zombie Samus that hunted you in Fusion, which is the last Metroid game. They've basically now made there's 6 of them in the game, and they're all these robots, and they're indestructible. So you basically have to get around them and avoid them. But eventually you get a power up what allows you to take them out. So that's the objective, is to get around them and explore until you get to the point where you can find this power up. Which is one-use power-up that lets you kind of take them out, and it's very dramatic, like third-person camera angle. Yeah, it's great. I mean, I was only allowed to play the first 2 hours. There was one situation where that did frustrate me, to be honest, where I got really stuck, and if I felt it was a little bit cheap. There was like one section where it's like, people hated in the old Metroid games that there'd just be one block that is not signposted.
Yeah,
you just randomly shoot to progress, right? Like just bullshit, basically.
That's why I bounced.
There's one of those in the early start of the game, and if there wasn't a Nintendo rep there, I'd still be there now, just shooting the scenery. So that was a little, but at the same time, it's pleasing that it's not handholdy like some of the recent games were as well. It doesn't assume that you're thick. This game, it doesn't handhold you too much. There's a lot of options in the map to kind of mark stuff, and there's a log of like the most recent significant things that happen. So it's easy to kind of come in and after a week or whatever, not playing it from that perspective. But yeah, no hidden blocks, please. That's.
I hope it does well, because Metroid as a franchise is one of Nintendo's smallest. And I always make little jokes about how more people have bought Animal Crossing, the last Animal Crossing, than every Metroid game combined. And it's part of it's unfortunate, right? The games have launched on consoles where it's not quite well suited, or consoles that have sort of not done very well. Some of it is because it's sort of it's a rare Nintendo game that actually is more Western than Japanese.
Yeah.
So there's a few reasons for it, but it's never quite broken. If this game does more than 2 million, it is a hit. for Metroid, and it'd be really good.
I think it'll do all right, actually. I think this had a
Might
big
do,
push.
maybe.
I've got a feeling. Hopefully, I'm wrong there, but I feel like I get the impression a lot of people are waiting around to play a big Nintendo first-party game right now. That's how it feels for me.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like there is one this year.
Well,
And I think that's not bad. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's nice. There's a variety of different things.
I guess the point is, I think there's the gap for Metroid Dread to actually. I mean, that's what I feel. I'm definitely waiting to play something like Nintendo polish, even if it is a.
I mean, let's be honest. Saying this game's going to be like the best-selling Metroid is like saying that I'm going to do my best 100-meter sprint. Like it's not going to take much. I mean, just by releasing on Switch, it'll probably do that. They've never sold.
Well,
it's interesting to see
Switch
them
boost
market
has
it,
been
but
a thing,
they don't really have. Yeah, but I mean, you look at Pikmin, right, which is another series that hasn't really sold. I mean, they re-released that, and it's not like it's done 10, 15 mil like some of the popular franchise re-releases, your Marios and Zeldas and whatnot. So it'll do probably well in context of the series, but it's interesting to see them really push it marketing-wise, but then they don't really have any other games this year.
But that's what interests me. Every time Nintendo do decide, you know what, we're going to give this game a go. We think this game has potential. They did it with Luigi's Mansion, the last Luigi's Mansion game, and it did really strong numbers, that game. They can do it. They can take a franchise that's sort of got a small, loyal fan base, but not a big seller, and then go hard on it if they feel they've got the right game. And the fact that they are marketing this quite heavily suggests that they believe in the product. They believe in the game. And if Nintendo believe in it, then that's probably worth paying attention to.
I want to know if you believe in Super Monkey Ball Banana Mania, Chris. Are you a fan? It's today. It's the release date today. We reviewed
when is it? Is it the release date today?
Is it today? Have I made that wrong?
I'm going to buy it right now. If you're right,
I think there's an early access version of it.
Wikipedia says it's today to me. I mean, if I've got that wrong, that's not my fault.
I thought it was next week.
It says initial release date first on the internet, so if I got that wrong, don't blame me.
But there is a version of it if you buy the digital deluxe edition or something. You can get an early version of it.
Am I actually miles? Is the internet wrong there? Because that's not my fault.
4-day early access, October the 1st. Well, I'm buying that tonight.
And obviously as well, it's reviewed well over here. I'll jump over to Chris's review, Chris Scullion's review here, where he gave it 4 out of 5, 4 stars out of 5. I'll go to the summary bit because obviously that's the bit everyone's going to skip to. Let's be honest. But read the rest of the article; it's dead good, of course, always. But I'll do a summation for this video, of course. It says Banana Blitz is a joyous celebration of what are still arguably the three best games in the series. There are a few slight performance issues, and we have no doubt diehards will argue about the overall feel, but there's a wealth of entertaining banana hunting here regardless. Then the positive retains that simple yet infinitely compelling monkey ball gameplay. All 12 minigames are present and accounted for. Ranking challenge modes online leaderboard ensures longevity, and a fun selection of guest characters included in the base game. But you can't view replays of other players' leaderboard entries, which would be interesting, actually, which is a bit of a shame. But either way, I mean, this is Super Monkey Ball, isn't it? What more can you say about that?
I've read a few reviews of this because I'm up for it. I'm up
for this, man. Bring it on.
I'm up for this, yeah. But I imagine him like getting psyched up for it.
Yeah, but what disappoints me, I love a good arcade game. I've been enjoying that Cruising Blast game. It's been quite good on the Switch.
So it's really cool, isn't it?
But what worries me a bit is the reviews have sort of said, Monkey Target isn't right. And that really I know that kind of annoyed me a little bit. That's the reason why
they've changed. Supposedly, like if you're super, I think it's a bit dismissive to say super hardcore, but if you're an avid player, it sounds like you might notice that the physics are a little off, that they've changed them. I mean, the game's been ported properly to Unity, supposedly. So that does sound a little bit annoying, but I think I'm mostly going to be playing it on my own, like on kind of, not on my own, but, single player, and then maybe like having my kids play because they love the GameCube version.
Yeah.
Which I had them play on the Cube behind me, just to get that thing going. It's interesting about the announcer, isn't it? I don't know if this kind of didn't really take off as much as I expected it to, because it's quite a stunning story. That the guy who leaked the game, the guy who does the announcements, like ready, go. He leaked this game a year ago on his Instagram or something. Like he's like I don't think it was an interview with a media outlet. And he like had a script. I've got a script from Sega, and he's been hinting like all year, like before the game's even come out, that it's happening. And then people noticed that he wasn't in any of the footage. It was like a female announcer instead. And then he spent all summer saying, "Oh, it's legal issues. We're just trying to get it sorted out." and the game's out, and he's not in it.
And just binned him off.
And Sega gave me a statement saying, or gave Chris, a writer, a statement that he's never worked on this game and he's not been involved in the series for a long time.
Wow.
And then so it's a little bit of a Barney going on there.
Oh, silly boy.
I think he's accused them of discrimination against foreign voice actors, which, to be fair, is and I shouldn't even trivialize it by saying, to be fair, that's an important issue that I've written about and reported on in the past, because allegedly this is Chris has been reporting on this, not me. So I don't know the full story, but I know allegedly he wasn't credited in the original game, so people didn't really even know who the announcer was until recently in the internet age, and he wasn't credited. And I've reported on that a lot, and that's a big problem in video games and has been for years. People not getting credited properly, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no regulation. Japan is one of the worst kind of actors in this, that, they don't include people in the credits. It's still common in the West. If you leave the company before you ship, they can take you out. If you piss someone off, they can take you out. They don't have to give you proper credit. You might have worked on way more than you actually get. There is the IGDA have some guidelines on crediting, but you have to voluntarily adhere to them. So they are guidelines. But crediting in games is still a big issue, right? And that's why when you see a lot of the stuff that we write on VGC, I try and cover a lot of who worked on what, which is why we have, kind of people's names at the top of reviews and stuff like that, because I think that's important, right? It blew my mind when I went dev side, and it's like, all of these guys who worked on this game and that game and this game. I mean, I'm working with guys who've been working on games for like 30, 40 years, some of them. And it wasn't known in the public domain that, this guy was the artist behind all of these classic games and things like that. It wasn't widely known. I mean, certainly, I think in the early days of games, it was more of a recruitment thing, right? Like, they didn't want their employees poached, especially Rare. Like, Rare didn't have proper credits for a long time because he didn't want its employees poached.
Yeah.
Even as recently as like Perfect Dark, right? So recently, like 20 years ago, if you go and try and see who made what in Perfect Dark credits, it's all like kind of funny names, like, Chief Pummeler and like Best Terminator and things like that, rather than saying, oh, I did the art, I did the programming.
Yeah.
It's still even difficult now. I only know like who directed Perfect Dark properly because I know people who worked on it. If you're in the, it's nonsense. They need to sort that out. They really do. I've got a lot of, coming back to Monkey Ball, I've got a lot of sympathy for anyone who has a dispute in terms of crediting. But at the same time, also to flip that, I think if you spoke to veterans game developers as well, they'd also highlight that there's a lot of politics and bullshit involved in that. We imagine that because it is not regulated, it also causes arguments about, well, I should have this credit and I should have that. And that's why it should just be regulated.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, on that note, this is where we're going to end this episode of VGC Off the Record. Many people and many places to be, unfortunately. But thank you for joining us on this fascinating episode. Of course, to summarise, you can find the article currently in the pinned comment over in the chat, where Andy broke a little bit of exclusive Konami, Metal Gear Solid, Silent Hill and Castlevania news. Don't forget, if you do enjoy this, please do hit that subscribe button. We will be live every week on a Friday around 12:30 p.m. midday. So get your lunch and get ready and join us basically this time next week. Of course, you can check this out as well as a podcast, because this time I remembered to request press record on the audio, which is really, really useful. But thank you for joining us, Chris, and thank you for joining us, Andy. I hope you both have a wonderful day and, of course, a wonderful weekend. And thank you to everyone for watching. Subscribe, like, comment, all the usual YouTube stuff. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next week for another episode of VGC Off the Record. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.